Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome back. This one's a long time coming, and I'm sorry there's been a good bit of a delay between the posting of this review and the short where I tease the Duettos here, just with the holidays and everything, and a bunch of other stuff going on. But we're here, and it's finally time to talk about them. I've got to enjoy the Duettos now for about a month, and it has been a fun one at that. So we're going to get into it and talk more about it. I'm going to tell you about my experience using these in a living room, in a near field setting such as on a desk, and doing a variety of things with them, from music to games to watching TV, even YouTube, go figure. So I've really put them through their paces, and I got a fair bit to say about them. Mostly positive, just a couple things I'd like to see Sonus Faber work on a little bit, but it's been a fun ride, so let's get into this. All right, chapter 1 here will just be the general user experience, how easy it is to set these up, get yourself going, you know, all that jazz, the basics of use. The Duettos work pretty well. There's a couple quirks, but overall setup generally goes smoothly. You're going to take your Duettos, you're going to plug them in, duh. After that, this is going to kick on, and you can go on an iPhone or an Android device and set them up for wireless use. If you're an iPhone user, you'll set them up as an AirPlay speaker through the Wi-Fi setting page. Going to be a little bit different for you Android users, but essentially you'll just use Google Home, and that has a process of its own. Once connected, you'll easily be able to use these through AirPlay, and it sounds good. Couple issues though. With AirPlay, they usually connect well and do fine, at least from the phone to the master speaker. There's a master and then there's a secondary. Sometimes though with AirPlay, I've noticed that the secondary will cut out a little bit. It doesn't do it all the time. It's not enough to be like, nah, don't buy these, but it did happen a little bit. Maybe that's a software thing. Maybe they can fix that with a firmware patch. I don't know, but I noticed it happened to me a little bit. You can also connect through Bluetooth, or through HDMI ARC, or through an optical connection, or just good old-fashioned analog. That analog in also has a switch on the back of the master speaker to determine whether or not that's just going to be a simple line in, which you'd use with virtually all typical analog devices, and a switch for phono in case you want to just wire a turntable directly into. You don't often find that on a lot of active speakers, so that is sweet. Another note about setup: when you get these going, you're going to have to take your master speaker and press a button on the back panel of that for pairing to the secondary speaker, and then you will press a pairing button on the back of the secondary speaker. Both these locations are right underneath where the power cord connects at the very back of the speaker. Upon doing that, they should sync up and you're ready to go. A little bit more on my use cases. When using these with HDMI ARC, they worked pretty well. Again, though, I still got a little bit of cutout from the secondary talking back to the main. It wasn't an HDMI issue, otherwise I would have seen that behavior occurring on the main speaker as well and just have an outright cutout. Rather, there was only the occasional quirk with this speaker cutting out. It, again, happened not enough where it bothers me a whole lot, but it happened enough that I should mention it again, and just that I think it's something we should be aware of. Granted, I have a pre-release review sample as far as I know, and I haven't seen any software patches yet. There could be one that has since come out since the posting of this video, so check on that, see if there's any more information, but that's all I've got on that at the moment. It doesn't happen all the time. It's not like it's every other minute or something that's going to make you rip your hair out, but it's enough to notice.
Future Luke here with a little update about that. Sonus Faber did confirm that I in fact had a pre-release review sample, and some of the quirks that I have mentioned have since been corrected with the actual release units. So that is some good news. Probably don't have to worry about any of that then.
All right, let's get to the fun part. How do they sound? Well, I think that varies a little bit based on your use case, whether it's a more typical living room arrangement or Farfield, or whether they're near you at your desk, which of course would be near field. In both cases, they worked pretty well. And I gotta say, note about near field here, these did better for near field than I was expecting. It's not like they were particularly designed with that being the primary feature, whereas a lot of dedicated pro audio studio monitors are specifically made for near-field use. Now, would a dedicated near-field speaker be better if it's of a comparable level of quality? Probably so. However, that said, when just doing my testing and getting up as close as about 1.5 feet, just about, I could still pick up a good sense of center image where vocalists feel like they're dead center in the stereo image that I hear. That's pretty good. There's a lot of speakers that you cannot get that close to, active, passive, near field, far field, or otherwise, and actually maintain that sense. You know, some stuff you get within 3 feet and the driver's just no longer and it's not there. So that's a pretty good mark on the near field performance. Moreover, having these hooked up to a PC and playing games was pretty good. Sonus faber speakers on average tend to be a little bit softer in the treble department because they're going for a more relaxed sound, but it's not to say that these are undetailed. It is worth noting though, they might not be the best gaming speaker because generally we're listening, especially if you're playing like a competitive shooter, you're listening for footsteps. You're listening for the kind of sounds that are going to give away someone's location. Those are not necessarily bass heavy sounds, they're more mid-range to treble. And you want to have a nice sense of image for that. Of course, most of us are playing computer games with headphones on, let's be real. But for guys like me who do want a really good speaker solution that could work out for that and not always have something on my head and have a more natural sense of stereo field that you're going to get from speakers anyway, that can be a concern. And these do well. I don't think they're the best I've experienced in that category, but they definitely get a pass. And one thing that's nice, when your game has dialogue in it, like if it's story heavy or you just have really good character voiceovers, Sonus faber is known for romancing the human voice, and character dialogue sounds very nice on these. Near-field music listening was mostly a treat. Again, a little bit more of that relaxed Sonus faber profile, but being fully active, these things can really push and they can dig a little bit too for that bass response. I particularly like these for music that is already kind of detail rich in its mastering, because you're not going to lose too much, even with that little bit of a softer character that these have. If the mix was already detail heavy, well, it's going to maintain a lot of that integrity, and the little bit of a warm spin that these put on will actually come off very nice. If the mix itself is not as detail rich, say like rock or metal music or something like that, which generally isn't going for it anyway, let's be honest, you might lose a little bit of vocal and treble detail through these versus some comparable things. But if your listening is, again, more your audiophile grade music, your jazzy stuff that's going to have your brass instruments, stuff that's mixed with a sharper focus on the human voice, particularly like female vocals, these are going to do well since it's already got enough there to utilize what these are capable of providing. And the warm spin will just kind of make the whole thing pleasant anyway. Most of this holds true in far-field listening, though I do feel like these come back a little bit in detail for that, since I think that's what they were mostly designed for. And bass response is going to improve, particularly if you have them playing nice with whatever wall they're nearest to. Cool thing about that, some of the adjustment settings in the Sonus faber webpage, you'll just adjust it by literally going to the IP address of these on your network. You can adjust for being near or close to a wall and make a couple other adjustments as well that's really helpful. Sure enough, these were smashed up against my living room wall because that's just the way my room's got to be. I think I had them no more than a foot off the wall, maybe a little bit less, and enabling that close to the wall profile helped with boominess. These do have surprising bass output for something of its size. It seems to be a characteristic of active speakers and a thing I really appreciate about them as a whole. And these certainly don't disappoint in that regard. So if you may struggle with a little bit of boominess, activating that, problem solved. In my room, I really appreciated what these were capable of doing. They were smooth, relatively detailed, though still a little soft, and worked well with most genres. Again, I'm gonna say that they play a little bit nicer with things like female vocals, jazzy kind of music, or stuff that's mixed in a way where treble isn't really being crushed in the mix to begin with. As far as how the overall connectivity goes, just how you would integrate these beyond what I mentioned here in the beginning, There's a couple notes about that. You have optical, that's great. You've got HDMI, which is awesome, because a lot of products don't. That's great. Sonus faber, you done good. There's one thing, though, that's missing that's a real killer. This doesn't have a USB in. I mean, not a USB Type B, not traditionally, not a USB Type C, nothing. And this puzzles me. When I was running these with my PC, I used optical, and it was fine. I needed a little converter, though, because I have an ITX board in my PC, and it uses mini optical through a separate DAC dongle audio thing that my Asus motherboard came with, so that was a little bit tricky. Most of you won't have that problem, though, if you're using them with a PC. But still, why no USB? Now, there's some out there who say, oh, well, USB isn't good for audio. I think that's malarkey, personally. I get where you're coming from, because optical doesn't transmit any potential noise. But you have things like USB isolators, which some debate the effectiveness or lack thereof of such products. But in my experience, having used many USB DACs and other things that have some form of USB audio implementation, such as many different types of audio interface for recording, which actually sound almost as good as most so-called hi-fi DACs nowadays anyway, that's never been a problem. So maybe that was their reasoning here. A little outdated if you ask me. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe they didn't think it'd be a need. I'm of the camp that the more options you give the consumer, especially in connectivity, ease of use, or accessibility, do it. So whenever there's a Duetto Mark II, Sonus faber, give me some USB-C, please. Thank you. Another question that came to mind when I was listening to these myself. Are these like a full system replacement? Say you had tower speakers and you wanted to downsize, and we're talking stuff that would be a comparable price point, right? You know, just being fair. Or if you had like a small multi-channel system, like a 3 or a 5 channel, and you wanted to downsize, something that could just produce a good phantom center and just go from there. Will these do it? They do produce a good phantom center. Are they going to replace a comparably priced tower? Not completely, though they will definitely sound really good in mid-range. It's just that since they are the size they are, and they do a lot with it, yes they do, it's not like they're going to completely replace a full-size tower speaker that would otherwise be of a comparable quality level. Now, granted, I shot these out against my ProListen system. Obviously, that's a little imbalanced, right? But just for the heck of it, okay, how did they do? Well, obviously, detail is a little bit less, presence is a little bit less, soundstage is definitely less. But for a fraction of the price of what a pair of S7Ts or other $20,000 speakers would be, they do pretty good. My system is actually going to be leaving me just as I'm downsizing, and I would say this is a product that I could live with. Yeah. I would say these could mostly fill the void for me. They're very pleasant to listen to, they're fun, and, well, they're easy as heck to use, at least compared to wiring up an entire system, especially if you had to run cables to the other side of the room like I do. Granted, I've already got that done, but thinking of you guys as new buyers, and who knows what your implementation might be. So overall, I am going to give the Duettos my recommendation. How do they fare against some other things like it, though? Let's say the KEF LS50s. These have arguably a bit of a more fun, or what some would say pleasant sound, but a little less accurate or detailed. So if you were buying a speaker to kind of serve dual roles of mastering and enjoyment, or if you wanted a more pinpoint sense of image or a little more treble detail like desktop gamers, I'm going to steer you more in the direction of, say, something like an LS50 or more that category because of that coax. But if you want something that is more often than not with most genres just pleasant to listen to, leans a little bit warm, or you know the Sonus faber sound and you really love it, these all day, every day. And then, of course, we've just got to talk about the appearance factor. It's a Sonus faber. There's little that ever is going to compete with them for great overall appearance and just gorgeous look, or especially a wife acceptance factor if that is a factor in your household. There was always a joke in the industry that Sonus faber was the most wife-approved speaker. And there were definitely clients of mine back when I was in the industry who had a much easier time selling their family members on Sonus fabers than they did just about anything else based on appearance or how it integrates or fits the room alone. And the Duetto is no exception. You can look closely and still see some wood grain in it, which looks sharp. You've got a nicely finished front with the leather around your drivers here. And of course, let me reach over here, pop a grill on for an even more subdued look. And I love how the grill is cut out to face the overall shape of what they call the voice of Sonus faber, which is just this combined unit right here of the woofer and your tweeter. You've got the nice Sonus faber badging below, you've got the leather on top, and the light up effect of the master speaker. On that note though, I wish the satellite or the secondary speaker had the lighting arrangement as well, because it just looks cool. And if you don't want it, you can turn it off anyway, but hey, in a day and age where there's RGB everything, more lights the better. Why not? Especially if you can control them. But that's minor. Overall, the look is really cool. Oh, and I should show you this. This is a really cool feature. Look how the port is integrated with this slotted design that slightly reminds me of an Ultraflex port on the much more expensive Homage series, because you have this slot-like design to it rather than just simply rounded. And look at this heatsink. This is the amplifier heatsink, which you've got the port vented into. And even this just looks super dope. I mean, look at this. You've got this geometric pattern going on to it, kind of like a diamond, that even somewhat reminds me of the way the voice is shaped in the front. So like, this is the kind of thing you're not even gonna look at too often, but it's still designed epically so that when you do see it, you go, wow, that's some attention to detail. Kind of reminds me what they did on the Homage series also, with the rear of the woofers looking like a jet engine and having this sweet red finish on them. Even though we're never gonna see them, still they care about that attention to detail, even in the things that won't be directly or often observed. And that is definitely a trademark of Sonus faber. They really do care about the level of detail and design that goes into these things, and they want to go to sleep at night knowing that they put their best into every component, that just about everything is beautiful. Whether you're going to see it or not, they'll know it for themselves, and you'll know it hearing it from me, or if you just so happen to get a look at those components yourself. So for $4,000, I'm a fan of the Duettos. I do think they're worth the asking price. Let's say you're looking at Sonetto 2s, which I think come in around $2,500, maybe a little bit more, which would be probably the closest passive equivalent, a little bit larger than this, but close. And you needed to buy amplification and a source for that anyway. Well, by the time that you buy anything good enough to hook up to a speaker like that, you've pretty much paid for the Duettos. And the active solution, depending on your use case, just might be the way to go, because it's out of the box, you plug it in and everything's matched and it just works. Versus, say, Sonetto 2s, these definitely are comparable in terms of sound, and at least in bass performance and just overall tightness of presentation, edge it out, because that's just what actives tend to do. So I think the value proposition's there if you're a fan of something that is not undetailed by any means, but just leans a little more warm, a little more pleasant, a little more sugar on top, or you know the Sonus faber sound I'm trying to describe. These are a great contender. All right, guys, well, that's it for my thoughts. I really do like the Duettos. I want to see what Sonus faber continues to do with the ideal of active speakers in the future. I want more. How about Duetto towers? How about a Duetto center? How about an entire active wireless system that's multi-channel? I am waiting on more manufacturers to do exactly that, because that is what I would really want to have in my home, and I think as time goes on, that becomes a more and more viable and performant and cost-effective option. So, my friends at Sonus faber and Macintosh, think about that, because I'd love to see it. Anyway, guys, thanks for catching up with me and for checking out this review. I hope you got something decent out of it. I've got some more content on the way. I still have a lot to upload from the audio show back at Capitol. Just holidays and a lot of demands for projects at the house that needed to get done have taken up a lot of time, considering I'm only really doing this part-time anyway right now. But it's coming, so stay tuned. There's a lot more. And I've got more reviews with some incoming product as well. And now that we're finally in the new year and some things are getting out of the way, I will be more frequent with uploads. So I'm excited about that. Hope you all are looking forward to it as well. And of course, be seeing you.